Hello and welcome to Newsclick. The Lieberhan Commission report has finally been released 17 years after the demolition of the Babari Masjid in Ayodhya. The nation was waiting to see what this report would say, but I think what the nation has seen has been a raging controversy about the import of the Commission's findings, and perhaps even more important, about what is going to be done with these findings of the Commission's report. To discuss these issues, we have with us today Sukumar Muralidharan, veteran journalist, now working freelance, and South Asia representative of the International Federation of Journalists. Suku, the report is out. What does the report conclude? And perhaps even more important, what are the significance of these conclusions?
Yeah, well, there is no action recommended by the report. That is the first point that we have to note about it. And in fact, the conclusion is just in terms of the people who've been named, who've been indicted for, as the judge puts it, bringing the nation to the verge of communal discord and disharmony. And these number 68. There are 68 people who are indicted. Now, if you look at it in terms of sheer judicial procedure, fairness, if you consider the number of witnesses that were summoned to depose, the number of witnesses that actually deposed is just 94, of which 24 are journalists. So you could take 70 as a number of material, consequential witnesses who have deposed before the commission. And not all of them have been indicted, of course, but some of them have. So the number of people who have deposed before the commission, the number of people who have been indicted is roughly the same. So does this meet the test of procedural fairness? People who have not appeared before the commission, who have not been given the opportunity to depose, have been indicted. In that case, there should be sufficient material evidence gathered from other sources indicating their complicity.
So are these findings at all actionable in any sense?
They're not actionable at all because there is a criminal prosecution that is proceeding on the side in Meerut, in a courtroom in Meerut, and that has been subject to numerous adjournments and delays and obstruction, and it's not seeming to get anywhere. Now, it was expected that the commission could provide some material basis for probably giving that a greater sense of urgency, a greater sense of meaning, but that clearly is not the case. The commission signally fails to do that.
In the media frenzy that we witnessed in the day when the commission report was leaked, and in the following few days when it was finally tabled in Parliament, we saw the BJP once again and the Sangh Parivar going on the offensive, disclaiming any responsibility for what happened or even justifying the demolition, and the Congress putting the onus of responsibility on the Sangh Parivar, saying, to me, both looked, the Lieberhan Commission has blamed the Sangh Parivar, but has not provided sufficient evidence or actionable points. And the Congress doesn't seem to have a great deal of strength in their argument, because they too have said that there's no action requires to be taken.
There's no action that requires, which is the most ironic thing you can say about a crime that kind of shook the nation and traumatized the nation for no less than 8 years and left a trail of bloodshed in various parts of the country. It's very ironic that finally we've ended up with this report which says nothing and gives you no guidance on what possible correctives or what possible sanctions can be given to those responsible for it. So it is inherent in the nature in which the judge approached his task that this should be the conclusion. For instance, if you look at the 94 witnesses who've deposed before the commission, that's an average of less than 6 for every year that the commission was in session. So this is a dismal record. I mean, like one witness every 2 months, which is really a dismal record. Then the commission has passed strictures against the lawyer who was their counsel for much of that period of time. It's difficult to avoid the suspicion that he's brought a lot of personal factors into this report, and in that process vitiated the entire message of that report.
In India, we've always had a very healthy, some would say even to the extent of getting unhealthy cynicism about commissions of inquiry. The Lieberhan Commission would certainly seem to have increased the public's cynicism regarding such inquiry processes.
Well, that's very unfortunate, but if you look at the entire, say, 20-year career of, 25-year career of Ayodhya as a political issue, there have been some commissions of inquiry which have gone into certain aspects of it, like, for instance, the Bombay riots of 92-93 were connected to that whole mobilization, nationwide mobilization. You had the Sri Krishna Commission which inquired into it and came up with a very good report. Now, it's another matter that there's been no action taken on that report. The Bihar government similarly had appointed a commission of inquiry on the Bhagalpur riots of 1988 and 89. And that too has come up with a report in much quicker time than the Lieberhan Commission. And there has been a prosecution, and there have been people who have actually been convicted for that. So there is other secondary material that could have been drawn by Mr. Lieberhan, but he chose not to. And over and above that, the report is rife with factual errors. For instance, it mentions at one place that in 1990, the Shiv Sena BJP alliance came to power in Maharashtra, which is plainly untrue. It mentions that in 1990, Gujarat was under BJP rule, which is again plainly untrue. It was the Gujarat unit of the Janata Dal and the Congress that was in power at that time. So there are these, obvious inaccuracies, which speaks of very, very poor application of mind, very poor returns for the 17 years that this country has invested in this whole commission of inquiry process.
Given the fact that one could virtually anticipate a poorly performing commission of inquiry, I think the repeated extensions with rather thin justifications for that, looking in with hindsight, do you think the government could have done something to expedite the commission, refuse to give extensions or some such thing? And do you think in future for such commissions, some steps could now be taken to ensure that the experience we've gone through with the Lieberhan Commission is not repeated?
Certainly, I think there should be a case that commissions of inquiry should submit some kind of interim report every time they ask for an extension. And secondly, we should also be mindful of the fact that the commission was obstructed in many ways right through its functioning, although that does not quite condone the very poor report that we finally got. We have to know how many witnesses were summoned, how many failed to turn up, what processes were used by the commission to secure their testimony. In some cases, the commission issued notices, non-bailable warrants, and hence in that way secured the testimony of several of the principal accused. In many cases, it chose not to. We have to inquire into how much of the official record was open to the commission of inquiry. For instance, we know that the Union Home Secretary then, Madhav Godbole, had prepared a plan 1 week before December 6, 1992, under which the area would be cordoned off, it would be taken over, and it would be placed under the secure safekeeping of a central detachment of security force, army and paramilitary. Why was that not implemented? So there are several such issues, and we would have thought that the commission would have gone into all these issues in depth, but it has chosen not to.
To conclude, let me pose this question. Like you said earlier, this has been perhaps the most traumatic episode and sequence of events that this nation has gone through, almost repolarizing the nation along communal lines in a way unseen since partition. Yet this entire series has been allowed to happen. The Lieberhan Commission has not helped us to draw any conclusions, nor is the polity look as if it is equipped to respond to this in a manner to ensure that such polarization does not take place in future. What do you think is the takeaway from the Lieberhan Commission report, and how do you see this unfolding in the months to come?
Well, the discourse has changed a bit. At one time, the minorities were being castigated for being out of tune with the central cultural ethos of the country, and insisting on maintaining this alien structure which was built as a kind of standing offense to the dominant culture of this country. Now the discourse has changed. Now the minorities are held guilty of being out of tune with India's march towards being a global superpower, and holding back that march by their outdated habits of thought, their outdated social customs and traditions, and also of being guilty of terrorism, which is a kind of, an effort to block this march towards superstardom and so on, global power. So that discourse has changed, but there is still very much a stigmatization of minorities that you see, that you perceive. And this is, in a sense, continuous with the legacy of Ayodhya. And now to turn back that tide would involve going back to 1983-84 and figuring out why that whole issue came onto the national radar screen and why that issue caught fire in a manner that mainstream political parties were unable to do very much about. So, in that sense, we could have expected a great deal from Lieberhan, but unfortunately we have not obtained anything.